But we know the Lord hears our prayers, and we can always trust that His will will be done. So we hope everybody gets out of the hospital soon. All right. Well, we've arrived at a strange book in the Bible. I say. I guess other scholars and people who know their Hebrew much better than I do also have trouble kind of interpreting this book. We're talking about Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. Some Bibles use that title. If we just kind of step back a little bit, we looked at Proverbs several weeks back, which was kind of this general set of guidelines for us, and things, good advice, and sort of a guidebook for human beings. I mean, the whole Bible is that way, of course, but a lot of really good, short, pithy sayings and proverbs, but things that don't, they're not promises. They're things that are generally going to be true. Then we looked at Ecclesiastes, which is kind of takes the opposite look of the exceptions to the rule, let's say. So if Proverbs is the sort of the general rules, Ecclesiastes kind of covered some of those exceptions where, there's no guarantees, chance and circumstances happen to all, I think was one of the verses. But there also are some proverbial-like passages in Ecclesiastes, but it's really what happens when you live your life under the sun without God. It's a pretty miserable existence, and sadly, that is where most of our world, most of the population of the world, does reject the Lord, and so that book was interesting, and we had a good discussion. We all had some good points. So we're still in these kind of wisdom, poetry books of the Bible. So now we're kind of coming to this book, Song of Songs. So just make a couple quick comments, and then Jared can play it, and we'll kind of talk about it. So just the title itself, Song of Songs, just to use that title, it's kind of like it's a Jewish idiom, I guess they call it, but it's kind of like King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Holy of Holies, that type of idea. It's the greatest song. It's the best song. So the Song of Songs, and it says that it's the Song of Solomon. So we'll talk about that in 1 second. But this book is kind of hard to categorize it. It's a book of poetry. I say it's kind of PG-13. And its descriptions. It's not graphic, but it's a kind of a passionate love story, and so PG-13 maybe. But it's a little bit hard to interpret. A lot of people ask, and we'll get to this after we watch it, talk about this, but why is this even in the Bible? It's kind of a strange thing, although it's poetry, and the narrator in the video is going to talk about this, that in that culture, in that time period, in the ancient cultures, like we would say from our perspective, this was kind of a common type of literature. So, they didn't have books, they didn't have the internet. So, when they wrote something down, it was usually kind of a big deal, or it was something that was used maybe for, I won't say entertainment, but it was maybe, there was a deeper meaning behind most things that are written down. So anyway, lots of people tried to figure out this book, the Song of Solomon. So as far as the author goes, it says right in there, in the first verse says the Song of Songs, which is of Solomon. So you would think it would just be written by Solomon, and that's or at least it was maybe it was commissioned by Solomon. Solomon had a lot of poets and musicians and all sorts of people working for him. So maybe he commissioned it, maybe he wrote it himself. But there's some people, and the narrator will talk about this, a lot of people don't think he's the actual author. What they think it is that it just means that it was written in the tradition of Solomon's wisdom. So it's kind of, this is the greatest song ever, and it's kind of like something that Solomon would write. So, yeah, I kind of see, and the reason that they mostly say that is because you'll hear that a lot of people think that, a lot of scholars think that it's kind of weird that Solomon would write such a set of poetry because it's rather monogamous, I guess I'll say. It's just love between two people, and Solomon had 700 wives or whatever it was. So I think there's a good way to answer that. We'll talk about that. So I'm kind of sticking with it. I think it is Solomon, or at least commissioned by Solomon. They also say that it's kind of written in the third person. It's not, as far as Solomon goes, Solomon's mentioned, the groom or the young man in the story or the book doesn't really speak directly as Solomon, so that's another reason they give maybe it wasn't Solomon, but I think a lot of things are written in the third person. So in fact, Solomon, I think he called himself the preacher in Proverbs. So I think Solomon kind of does refer to himself as the third person. I think even the royalty of today kind of does that. If you ever see the queen, she used to say, we are not amused, or it's the royal we. So sometimes maybe that royal position, made them write a little bit differently. Okay, so let's see, anything else to mention before we watch it here? I think we'll leave it at that. We'll watch it and we'll come back and kind of talk about the structure and maybe what are some of the possible interpretations on this. So, like I said, it's a little bit different kind of a book in the Bible, but I think it does have some interesting applications and meaning for us. And even though we're kind of dealing with lots of trouble and difficulties in the world, and recently with our dear brothers and sisters here going through health issues, and this story is about young people, But the good thing is with God's eternal, and so He doesn't. He sees our whole life from beginning to end, and so there's good things for us in the Scripture at any age. So even though this is seems to be mostly about some younger people and early in their life, I think there's some lessons for us. So go ahead, Gary.
To the book of the Bible, it's 8 chapters of love poetry. And while there is an introduction and a conclusion, the book doesn't have any kind of rigid literary design, and that's because it's a collection of poems. They're not meant to be dissected or taken apart. They're meant to be read as a flowing whole and simply enjoyed. The first line of the book tells us that it's the Song of Songs, which is the Hebrew idiom, like the Holy of Holies or the King of Kings. It's the Hebrew way of saying the greatest thing. So this is the greatest song of all songs. Then we're told in the first line that this Song of Songs is of Solomon, which could mean that he's the author. His name does begin in the book, after all. But as you read the poems, you discover that the main voice is that of a woman called the Beloved. And while there is also a male voice, it does not seem to be Solomon. Solomon is mentioned a couple times in the poems, but he's never a speaker. And you do have to admit, Solomon is a very odd candidate as the author of this book, given the fact that he has 700 wives. For the lovers in the Song of Songs, they are the only ones in the world for each other. So the of Solomon likely means in the wisdom tradition of Solomon. He was known for his wisdom, his poetry, his love of learning about every part of life. And Solomon became the father of wisdom literature in Israel. And so his legacy is here carried on through a collection of love poems that explores the human experience of love and sexual desire. The opening poem introduces us to the basic theme of this book. We hear the voice of the young woman who delights in her man, a shepherd. Now, she's not married to him yet, but it becomes clear that they're engaged and they cannot wait to be together. From the introduction, the poems flow back and forth from the woman's voice to the man's, lines shifting from scene to scene without any kind of clear linear sequence or storyline. The poems move in these symphonic cycles, and key images and ideas get repeated and developed. So, one of the basic themes uniting the poems is the intense desire that this couple has for each other, expressed through their constant seeking and finding. So, after the opening poem, they're separated but on the hunt for one another. So the woman calls out, or she'll wake up from a dream, or go looking for her lover, and more than once they'll find each other, they'll embrace, and then right when things start to get a bit racy, the scene will suddenly end, and a new one will start, they're separated, looking for each other, and on it goes. Another repeated theme is the joy of the couple's physical attraction for one another. So multiple times, they'll pause and describe each other with these elaborate metaphors. And here it's very helpful to know that these images and metaphors in Hebrew poetry are not primarily visual. If you try and paint a picture of these people based on the metaphors, you will end up with something that looks very, very strange. What you're supposed to do is reflect on the meaning of these images as they relate to the man and the woman. So you'll read through the poetic cycles, and the tension will keep building, and their desire and joy and attraction. And this spiraling repetition is a poetic way of heightening and focusing on the mystery and power of sexual love. It all comes together in the conclusion, which pauses to summarize what these poems are all about. Love is as strong as death. Its passions are as severe as the grave. Its flashes are of fire, a divine flame. Many waters cannot extinguish love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, he would be utterly scorned. The poem highlights the power and the intensity of love, how it's both beautiful but also dangerous. Like fire, love can destroy people if it's abused, or be life-giving if it's protected. Ultimately, love expresses the insatiable human longing to know and be fully known and desired by another. Love is one of the most transcendent and mysterious experiences in human life, and as a part of the Bible's wisdom tradition, this book says it's a gift from God. After this, there's an odd poem about Solomon trying to do what the previous poem just said was impossible, to buy love. The woman rejects Solomon's offer, and then the book concludes with the man and the woman. They're separate once more on the hunt for each other. He calls to hear her voice, she begs him to run away with her, and that's how the book ends. It's totally open-ended. But that's a lot like love, which never truly concludes, because there's always more to discover and pursue in your beloved. And so true love has no end, and neither does this book. Now, through history, the big question raised by the Song of Songs is, what on earth is love poetry doing in the Bible? There have been three main interpretations of this book throughout history. In Jewish tradition, it's been read as an allegory, each character a symbol. So the woman is Israel, the man is God, and their love is the symbol of the covenant between God and Israel made at Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah. This view flowed into the Christian tradition, but the characters were swapped. So it's about Christ's love for his people, the church. And this interpretation was inspired by Paul's words in Ephesians 5, that a Christian husband's love for his wife is a symbol of Christ's love for the church. What's interesting is that in the last 100 years, archaeological discoveries among Israel's ancient neighbors in Egypt and Babylon has turned up all kinds of ancient love poetry that's very similar in language and imagery to the Song of Songs. We see that love poetry was a meaningful part of Israel's cultural environment, which has led most scholars today to view the Song of Songs as what it presents itself to be, an arrangement of Israelite love poetry reflecting on the divine gift of love. But that doesn't mean that it's only ancient love poetry. There's a key feature of these poems that sticks out when we read them as a part of the Old Testament, and that's the overwhelming use of garden imagery. There are powerful echoes of the Garden of Eden and the idyllic scene between the married couple in the early chapters of Genesis. So the image of the man and the woman naked and vulnerable, but completely unified and safe with one another, this resonates in the background of the Song of Songs. It's as if in these poems we are witnessing the love of a couple whose relationship is untainted by selfishness and sin. And so ultimately the song holds out hope that even though our own relationships are so often distorted by selfishness, love is a transcendent gift. And it's meant to point us to something greater, to the gift of God's love that will one day permeate and transform his beloved world. And And that's what the Song of Songs is all about.
All right, so pretty good summary, I think, of, as always, with these Bible Project videos. They get a lot in there in a couple minutes, I think. All right, so let's just let's kind of talk about the. Well, let me just go back to the author theories on that. So again, I do believe it is most likely that this has something to do with Solomon, that he was involved, if not the actual writer. But we'll see as we go through maybe why I think that. So as far as the literary structure, you mentioned that it's not like a story that you can. It's not like the book of Esther, for example. It's very that could be like a movie plot. It's very well structured, has all the characters, and it's got a backstory, and there's action and everything. And it's very linear. This story it's just kind of all over the place. Kind of goes back and forth between some different characters. So he also mentioned that the main voice was the young woman, and he mentioned that she's referred to as the beloved. So when I was looking at this, at least all the translations I looked at, it's kind of, I think he got that backwards. The beloved, I believe, is the young man, and the young woman is actually referred to as the Shulamite woman. The Shulamite woman. So you might have just flipped that around, at least from what I saw when I was reading through different translations. So the young man, as we hear his voice, is referred to as the beloved. Sometimes translated as the groom, or in some of the translations they just say he. So how's that? So they weren't quite sure what to call him, so they just called him he. And in those translations, they refer to the young woman as she, right? So that's kind of boring. She and he just going back and forth. Most of them will say the Shulamite woman or the beloved. Some will say the groom for the young man. Anyways, so if you just read this, you just kind of read through this book without kind of paying attention, it's really confusing because it's a bunch of different people talking. And so it's the young woman, and then you kind of really pay attention, and it'll be the young man responds, and then sometimes there's some other voices that we hear. We sometimes hear the groom's friends are in there, or the daughters of Jerusalem. So sometimes the young woman is talking to, or they're talking to her, the daughters of Jerusalem. So there's some. And you can imagine these two young people, and they have their group of friends, right? And so you can almost imagine some sort of courtship or some preparations for maybe a future marriage. But the literary structure is a little bit difficult to follow if you're not paying attention. So who is this Shulamite woman? Do we have any clues about that? So there's different ideas on that, who this might be. So it kind of depends if you think this is literally Solomon writing it or if it's someone else. But I think it's a good question, and here's why I think that. Because what I think the explanation of this and who the author is and maybe the timing of this poetry, I believe this may be in the early days of Solomon's life. And so one good explanation would be that this was when Solomon was young. We know he took the throne at a very young age. And so maybe this is Solomon's first love or his first wife before he had the 700 additional wives that he added later. And so he was enamored with this one young woman. So to me that it would make sense that could be it. Some say that could be the daughter of Pharaoh. We know in First and Second Kings when Solomon is when he's inaugurated, the first thing he did was married Pharaoh's daughter. So maybe this whole sort of turbulent courtship between Solomon and Pharaoh's daughter. Who knows? But that could be an explanation. Another candidate that comes up is Abishai. So if you remember when David was old, they found a young girl to be kind of his servant. He was in very ill health at that time, and so she was kind of taking care of him, kind of a nurse. And one of David's sons, after Solomon became king, wanted to marry her. Apparently she was quite beautiful, and Solomon put a stop to that, and so it's possible that this poetry is about her. So who knows? So we don't really know for sure, but to me it's kind of an interesting idea to think about, that maybe this is early days for Solomon, and he is the one that this portrait is being painted of. And so it could have been one of those two young women, but we don't really know for sure. As I mentioned, and as the narrator mentioned, there's just this dialogue going back and forth. And so you hear the voice of the beloved, or the groom, and then you hear the voice of the young woman, and it just bounces around between them. And this seems, it's passionate but sort of turbulent courtship, I'll call it that. I would use the term with some of the language. You could use the word infatuation, maybe. So they're infatuated with each other, and so they sometimes the moon rises and sets, on each other, and other times it seems like they're kind of there's a little bit more tension and struggle that goes on, and so there's very poetic language for all of that. Okay, so why is this in the Bible? Again, nobody knows for sure. Lots of people have, I'm sure there's guys have gotten their PhDs on this at a seminary or something. But there's some of the possibilities that were mentioned. Is one is this is God's love story for his chosen people, so the Israelites, and so God is the beloved, and the Israelites are the young woman. I think that makes sense. I also think the other explanation makes sense, which is that it's the church is the young woman, and Jesus is the beloved. So that analogy kind of fits as well. But ultimately, whether it's one or both of those, if you kind of read this poetry that way, it's really showing you that humans really desire ultimately to have close, intimate relationship. And since God is the creator and he's the one who invented that, that's revealed here, I believe. It also shows us maybe a couple other things that I was thinking about. I think you see this idea of the pursuit. And I think God is passionate in his pursuit for his children, for his creation, for humans, for all humankind. And so he's, have you ever heard the expression, the hounds of heaven? And I've heard that used when, there's somebody who's kind of thinking about becoming a Christian or following after God, but they're kind of fighting it a little bit. And there's that expression, God released the hounds of heaven. And so all these circumstances are just piling up on this person, and eventually they give in and they become a Christian. And they turn their life over. So kind of that idea. I also think this, I alluded to this a minute ago, this, if this is God sort of writing in a allegory or a comparison to himself, kind of shows a little bit of God's nature, Sometimes, the world especially, and we're probably guilty as well, in the church maybe, we think of God as this, hopefully we don't think of him as the old man in the sky with the gray beard and all that. But sometimes we think he's the killjoy, and he's got all these rules, we have to follow all the rules. And we forget that, God is, and you can see this throughout the scriptures, God has emotions. And he's a passionate God, an emotional God. And he gave us, we were created in his image. So that's one of the aspects, I think, of his nature, is that it doesn't. He's not emotional in the sense that he loses his temper the way we do, but he does get angry, right? We can read about that. But he also loves in a way that we cannot even imagine, to the point of John 3:16. So God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So I think that's a very legitimate way to look at this passage. And so just to wrap up here, I just want to mention that what this reminded me of is there are many passages in the New Testament, a lot of them in Revelation, that refer to the church as the what? What's the church? There's several different, the bride, right? And we're the house of the Lord, we're the body of Christ. We are the bride of Christ. And I don't think that's just some little, label that was kind of thrown around just because it kind of sounded neat. I think it's a literal, in a spiritual sense, a literal meaning of, or one of the nature, it is the nature of the church. And you see that in Revelation when Christ comes back. Revelation 21:9 says, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." So one of the mysteries, and Paul talks about it in Ephesians 5, this great mystery of men and women and marriage, and speaking of the church and how the husband loves his wife and the husband cares for the wife. That's Christ in the church. And so he cares for it deeply. And even though we mess it up, and we don't, we're not as good as the bride he deserves, through his power, his redemption, and his righteousness that he's put on his church, we will be united with him as his bride. So again, you see that. What did Jesus refer to himself in this context as? Remember? Quite a few times, actually. One time, the people were saying, how come your servants don't wash their hands and do all these things? And Jesus, remember what he said? When the bridegroom is still here, the friends don't, they're not going to be sad while the bridegroom's here. They'll be sad later. So Jesus refers to himself as the bridegroom quite a few times, actually, in the Gospels. And so and Paul talks about that the church would be presented to Christ as the pure virgin. So I think that's a pretty interesting picture that maybe we don't think about enough, or we don't realize what the church is. It's a spiritual bride for Jesus. And that kind of points to the eternal purpose of Jesus and God, which would be something for a different time. But anyways, go ahead, Rick.
When I talk to people and they want God, but they don't want the church.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the church is the bride of Christ. How can you have one without the other?
Yes.
And and I've been asking recently, and I mentioned this Wednesday night, people who don't attend church anymore, young people. And I asked the congregation, I'll do it again, to ask their kids who might not be faithful, what would it take, to bring you back? But one of the things that a man told me was rules. And you mentioned rules.
Positive or negative?
There was a negative.
They don't want the rules? Or
yeah, okay. There's too many rules in the church.
Well, you see the opposite in some ways, because a lot of the more legalistic congregations, like the Roman Catholics and such, they're getting a lot of converts. Now, they're still losing people to, like, people who are raised in the church leaving, so their net's still down. but they're getting a lot of converts, especially from Protestant churches, people who want more rules.
I have trouble hearing, but.
He's saying that the Catholic denomination, and the Greek Orthodox too, I read about, Justin, there's a lot of people, a lot of younger people that are going to those traditions because they have rules, because there's established tradition and doctrine. So it's interesting. There's kind of a split. Yes, there's the people that just, there's too many rules, and you can see that group of people, I think, in our society. And then there's this other, somewhat more recent, I think, last 4 years. Yeah, you can read about it. There's a lot of guys studying this, but they're going towards that.
I wonder if we needed to teach more strongly about the relationship of Christ and the church, and because, again, you can't have one without the other. I have people that grown men who tell me, my church is in the woods.
Right. Yeah, that's common. So the idea, the understanding of being part of the family is another, and being part of the house of God. What you're getting at, guys, is I think we don't teach what is the church, like what, I remember probably several times going through the book. I'm sure you guys have seen it, or probably, I won't say suffered under it, because that's probably not a nice way to say it. Why am I a member of the Church of Christ? Have you ever seen that book? It was written in the 50s, and it was used many, many times. And it doctrinally is great. It has all it is probably the closest thing to our creed, Garth, that you and I talk about sometimes.
I think that was written by Leroy Brownwell.
Yeah, it was written, it's doctrinally amazing, everything's good in there, but it kind of misses, you don't see grace in there, and you sort of don't see the big picture of what the church is, the bride of Christ, the house of God, how we relate. So anyways, now we're getting into a really interesting discussion, but our time is up. We'll keep going. Now we're coming up on the prophets. We're willing to keep going here, and so those are disturbing to me. We start getting into Isaiah and that.
I think you were generous in saying the book of Solomon was
PG-13. PG-16 maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's people think, a lot of people aren't Christians or don't have a relationship with God. They just have this idea, he's just the big killjoy, just wants to stomp on your fun. Hey, God invented sex. He kind of, but he invented all the other good things, and people just find ways to mess it up, But anyways, we got to stop on that note and take a break here. So see you guys in a few minutes.
That is a good point.
Yeah, that's something that is a more recent.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good.
I got your
card too. Hello, Bill.
Send my mailbox.
Your
card.
Oh, my card. Oh, yeah, you got it.
Hello, Becky. Like you're on foot.
Can she see?
Hi, Richard.
That eye's gotten cleared up where she can see? Good, because she was last week, they said a shadow. Yeah, your dad got. So now.
Are you liking you?
Good. Hard. 2 hour test. But he did.
Hey there.
2 hours.
She's
Is that your father you had it on?
Who was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.